It looked very beautiful, but behind the blooms, things were quietly falling apart. In our second year of gardening, we were harvesting more than ever. The garden was full of life. But what we didn't realize was that we were also slowly heading towards our next big challenge. Namaskaram, I'm SriDeep and welcome back to Blossom Your Way, where we focus on growing what matters, your garden, your home, and your life. This is the 5th episode of our Space Reform series, where I share our real experiences transforming a plain front lawn into a productive, thriving garden space. If this is your first time here, welcome! You will find all the earlier episodes from the Space Reform series linked in the description below. 6 months into gardening, we were amazed at how much we had grown in such a small space. That first patch gave us so much joy. We thought, why not go further? So we decided to remove the rest of our lawn. We paid someone $250 to rip out the grass. I remember watching the thick clumps being rolled away and thinking, this is it, the next big step. The space looked enormous and bare, but also full of potential. Then came the hard part, building it back up. My husband spent an entire weekend layering cardboard, compost, and then mulching it all by hand. We didn't have a wheelbarrow at the time, so it was just buckets, bags, and a lot of sweat. At one point, the garden looked more like a construction zone than a planting space. It was very interesting that since we actually started a front yard garden, we have had numerous conversations with our neighbors. Because it's in the front yard, when pedestrians walk by with their dogs, our garden became a talking point. As we were in the garden, people would just stop by, ask us what's going, they appreciate the fruit. If we had excess, we would give them to people. It just became such a beautiful neighborhood moment as well. And as we were removing the grass in the second patch, everyone got very curious and they would just stand by and say, what's happening here? Have you decided to build like a green shed or something? What are you planning to do? And then we just smiled and said, it's going to be much better than a green shed. This wasn't just about growing food anymore. It was about growing confidence. And we were learning by doing one bed at a time. Soon after we finished the second bed, things really took off. We had sunflowers, marigolds, herbs, and vegetables that just started to fill the space. Every walk through the garden felt like an adventure. We also planted roses, not just for the yield, but just for the beauty and hoping to attract a lot more pollinators. there was just this sense of calm and connection. I would walk out barefoot some mornings with a basket in hand and just return with dinner. It was just so satisfying. I just can't describe that in words. It was just miraculous. But as the garden grew, so did the work, and some small cracks began to appear. The timber beds started to loosen. Soil was leaking from the corners, and I also noticed that some beds were sinking slightly in the middle. Water would pool sometimes unevenly. Although it didn't seem like a really big deal at first, we both knew these were signs of trouble. My husband tried fixing things with longer nails, some metal brackets, and it did work temporarily, but deep down we realized it was a patch-up job. What we didn't realize with timber was the movement it can cause with the weather. So I think that was something that we didn't really think through when we chose timber beds, but I could feel that those movements were costing the garden, and it just felt like at one point that everything was just falling apart. With richer soil came another challenge: wild birds, especially miners. They loved our beds. They would perch on the edges and start digging around so much that the roots of our plants were sometimes exposed. So what we did was we installed bird netting to protect the beds. It was around the same time that Halloween was approaching. Now, we are not a family that actively celebrates Halloween, but one day some of the local kids walking past, they saw the netting and assumed that we had decorated our garden for Halloween. They came by dressed up, expecting chocolates. I mean, of course, although we didn't plan anything, we laughed and then we just grabbed what we had, so the kids are happy. It just expected to turn into one of those unexpected memories that just still makes us smile. And every year when Halloween happens, we automatically look at our garden thinking, it doesn't look like Halloween now, so that's all good. Over time, I also began to feel the garden in my body. And that's quite literally. Our timber beds were 4 feet by 6 feet. And I'm a very short person, so reaching into the middle was very tough. And we had added trellis on the beds, which limited access from one side. Now, after recovering from my gym injury, although I recovered, the recovery was not 100%. I only went back to about 80 to 90% of my capacity. And bending and stretching became a bit painful because I still had to use my knee, and that stretch really put pressure on the knees. Especially when I was weeding and pruning, and also sometimes harvesting, it was all very physically demanding. And suddenly, our simple raised beds didn't feel as practical anymore. In the next episode, I will share what really pushed us to redesign our garden, including the trees we planted 13 years ago that had now overgrown, blocked light, and turned parts of our garden into a dead zone. The wind had started snapping branches, we had to reconsider everything from shade to structure. If this episode resonated with you, or if you've outgrown your original garden layout, I would love to hear your story in the comments below. And please remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to begin. So, what will you begin today? I will meet you all in the next episode. Until then, please keep growing what matters. And if you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. That's how we can grow together.